It's 1:45 a.m. at Echo Park Speedway, and Bubba Wallace is diving to the bottom of the racetrack, tires brushing the edge of the double yellow line, throwing his car 3 wide in a battle he believes will define his entire season. The roar is deafening, brakes lock, metal shutters, and he threads the gap, holds his line, and crosses the finish, believing he has just secured one of the biggest results of his year. Then, almost instantly, silence. Officials huddle around a monitor. Something is being reviewed, and somewhere in that quiet, a celebration is about to be taken away. Within minutes, this stops being a story about a penalty from NASCAR and becomes a story about betrayal from inside his own house. Because the man about to dismantle Wallace's defense in public isn't a rival and isn't an official. It's his own boss. What began as a late race move for position would spiral into a public disagreement reaching far beyond the racetrack, pulling in his own team's co-owner, NASCAR's officials, and a rival driver he had already clashed with earlier in the same race. The race was the Quaker State 400 at Echo Park Speedway, delayed by a 3-hour, 9-minute rain and lightning stoppage that pushed the finish to 1:45 a.m. Ryan Blaney had dominated the night, winning the pole and both stages while leading 171 laps. A late crash involving Kyle Larson, Chase Briscoe, and Riley Herbst forced the race into overtime. On the final lap, Carson Hocevar led at the white flag while Wallace, running third, shoved Blaney forward and dove below the double yellow line to go 3 wide through turns 3 and 4. He braked hard, rejoined in third, then got a late shove from Ty Gibbs that carried him to second, while Christopher Bell's push sent Blaney to the win. Wallace believed he had finished second. Minutes later, he was black flagged, dropped to 29th, and stripped of 27 championship points instantly. For a driver fighting to hold his spot inside the playoff cut line, this wasn't just a number on a scoreboard. It was a direct hit to his postseason survival math. This channel, NASCAR Trackline TV, is closing in on 500 subscribers, and if you want the breakdowns other NASCAR channels won't touch, this is exactly why it's worth sticking around, because the real story here was only just beginning. Section 8.3.2 of the NASCAR rulebook states that a car going below the double-painted line to improve its position will be black flagged. Wallace's defense rested entirely on outcome, not intent. Bubba Wallace stated, "I stayed third and I was all over the brakes to make sure I did not advance." His team pulled SMT telemetry data showing he was braking rather than accelerating through the move, arguing he was handing the position back rather than taking it. The logic was simple on its face. He entered turn 3 in third, and he exited in third, meaning no net gain and no violation, or so the argument went. That defense earned Wallace a 31-minute meeting inside the hauler with Cup Series Managing Director Brad Moran. Leaving that meeting, Wallace offered only one line: "A penalty is a penalty." At that stage, the story still looked like a simple dispute between a driver and the rulebook, with no hint of the controversy waiting inside his own team. Then came the detail that changed everything, and it didn't come from NASCAR. It came from Denny Hamlin, Wallace's own 23XI Racing co-owner, breaking the incident down on his podcast. Hamlin explained that the rule does not hinge on whether a position was gained at the finish line, it hinges on the word "to." Going below the line to improve position is the violation itself, regardless of what happens afterward. Hamlin compared the yellow line to a wall, saying, "The minute that you step your foot out of bounds, it doesn't matter whether you gained an advantage or not." Then came the real bombshell. Hamlin revealed that camera angles showed Wallace was momentarily in the lead in the middle of turns 3 and 4, meaning he had, in fact, gained an advantage, even though it didn't hold at the stripe. NASCAR Vice President Mike Ford backed that up, stating that even a quarter-inch advantage counts, and that surrendering the position afterward does not erase the violation. The man who signs Wallace's paychecks had just publicly taken apart his own driver's case. The reaction stacked quickly across the garage and social media. Kevin Harvick delivered what many called the verdict that ended the debate, saying, "When you see him go from behind those cars to beside those cars, it's pretty hard to argue that you don't have an advantage." Mike Ford confirmed Wallace had briefly been scored in first place during the move. Motorsport analyst Bozy Tatarevich noted that NASCAR has been consistent in penalizing the attempt to improve position, regardless of the final result. The athletic NASCAR framed Hamlin publicly backing the penalty against his own co-owned team as one of the defining storylines to come out of Echo Park. Fans split immediately on the issue. Some argued the penalty made no sense, since Wallace lifted and never held the gain at the finish line. Others insisted rules are rules, and NASCAR had no real choice but to enforce them exactly as written. While that fire burned, a second one was already smoldering on pit road. Back in Stage 2, Wallace had blocked a hard-charging Ty Gibbs, who had nowhere to go and made contact, spinning Wallace through the infield grass and costing him stage points. After the race, Gibbs approached Wallace on pit road to apologize, and it did not go well. Wallace fired back, "I said there's an opportunity to give, and you didn't." He then aimed directly at the Toyota Manufacturer Alliance, saying, "That's Toyota teammates. We don't race very well together." Gibbs responded with his own version of events, saying he had been trying to help and received disrespect instead. That thread was left open and unresolved, sitting as a second fracture inside the Toyota camp, separate from the Hamlin situation, but feeding the same question now hanging over the entire team. And here's the part almost nobody in the mainstream coverage connected: how one penalty just reshaped the entire championship picture for 23XI racing. If this channel keeps finding the angles other NASCAR coverage misses, hit subscribe and stay with it, because what comes next matters even more for Wallace's playoff hopes. The numbers tell their own story. Wallace fell from 12th to 13th in the standings, now sitting just 55 points above the playoff cut line, a margin that would have been 82 without the penalty. He has finished outside the top 20 in 6 of his last 9 races. Wallace himself acknowledged the danger, saying, "Everyone behind us in points is like, oh, 23. They see that and are licking their chops. With the position that we are in, we're not safe." This raises an unconfirmed but pointed question. Is Hamlin's public rulebook over loyalty stance a sign of stricter internal culture at 23XI, or a sign that trust between driver and ownership is eroding before the playoffs begin? This isn't the first crack between the two. Wallace previously made a middle finger gesture toward Hamlin after an earlier last-lap incident, and Hamlin fired back sharply at the time. None of this has been officially confirmed by the team, but the speculation itself is now part of the story heading into North Wilkesboro. So where do you stand on this one? Team Wallace, if you believe a co-owner should always back his driver publicly, no matter what the data shows. Or Team Hamlin, if you believe honest accountability, even from ownership, is what separates championship organizations from the rest of the field. Drop your side in the comments below, and share this video with a NASCAR fan who needs to see exactly how this unfolded. Wallace and Gibbs will be forced back onto the same track, with no choice but to race each other again, first at North Wilkesboro Speedway on July 19th, then again at Daytona shortly after. The real test isn't the penalty itself, it's whether 23XI Racing can hold together under playoff pressure now that these cracks are public for everyone to see. If you enjoy real NASCAR breakdowns like this, you'll like what's coming next.